It was a dark and stormy night when three teenagers, Samantha, Josh, and Kyle, decided to embark on a ghost hunting adventure at an abandoned cemetery on the outskirts of their town. They had heard stories of unexplained occurrences in the area and were eager to investigate. As they entered the cemetery, they could feel a sense of unease wash over them. The gravestones looked weathered and ancient, and the wind howled through the trees. Suddenly, they saw a ghostly figure sitting in front of a tombstone, with a faint glow emanating from its eyes. The ghost seemed friendly at first, beckoning them over to come closer. Samantha, feeling brave, approached the ghost and tried to communicate with it. But as she got closer, the ghost suddenly lunged at her, grabbing her arm and sucking the moisture out of it. Samantha screamed in agony as the ghost continued to drain her life force. Josh and Kyle tried to intervene, but the ghost was too powerful. They realized too late that they were dealing with an evil spirit that had no intention of letting them leave the cemetery alive. They tried to escape, but the ghost was relentless. It chased them through the cemetery, with its eyes glowing brighter and brighter as it fed off their fear. The wind picked up, and the trees swayed violently as the ghost closed in on them. Just as they were about to give up hope, they stumbled upon an old mausoleum. Desperate, they ran inside and barricaded the doors, hoping it would keep the ghost at bay. Inside, they found an old journal that belonged to the original caretaker of the cemetery. The journal revealed the dark history of the cemetery, and how a powerful sorcerer had been buried in the same mausoleum they were hiding in. The caretaker had warned that if anyone disturbed the sorcerer's rest, they would awaken an evil spirit that would seek to destroy anyone who dared to enter the cemetery. The teens realized they had made a grave mistake, and they had to act quickly if they wanted to survive the night. They searched the journal for a way to defeat the ghost, and they found an ancient incantation that could banish the spirit back to the underworld. With trembling hands, they recited the incantation, and the ghost shrieked in pain as it was sucked back into the realm of the dead. The cemetery fell silent once again, and the three teenagers were left standing in the mausoleum, shaken but alive. From that day on, they knew they had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. They vowed to never return to the cemetery again and to stay away from dark magic and sorcery. The memory of the ghostly encounter would haunt them for the rest of their lives. As the weeks passed after their harrowing encounter at the abandoned cemetery, the three teenagers, Samantha, Josh, and Kyle, began to notice strange occurrences happening around them. Objects moved on their own, shadows flickered on the walls, and they heard whispers in the darkness. They tried to ignore the signs, thinking it was just their imagination playing tricks on them. But as the days went by, the occurrences became more frequent and intense. They knew something was following them home from the cemetery. Desperate for answers, they decided to research the history of the cemetery and its dark past. They discovered that the cemetery was built on top of an ancient burial ground, where a powerful sorcerer was buried centuries ago. Legend had it that the sorcerer was an evil practitioner of black magic, who sacrificed innocent lives to gain power and immortality. They also found out that the only way to destroy the cemetery and banish the evil spirits once and for all was to perform a blood sacrifice. The sacrifice had to be made using the blood of someone who was directly connected to the sorcerer's bloodline. They knew what they had to do, but they were terrified of the consequences. They could not bring themselves to sacrifice an innocent life, but they knew that they could not live with the threat of the spirits following them forever. In the end, they made a difficult decision. They would offer up their own blood, hoping it would be enough to satisfy the evil spirits and destroy the cemetery. They performed the ritual, reciting the incantation they had learned from the ancient journal. They felt a surge of power coursing through their veins as they cut themselves and let their blood flow onto the ground. Suddenly, the ground shook and the sky turned dark. They heard screams and howls coming from the cemetery, and they knew that they had succeeded in destroying the evil spirits once and for all. But as they looked at each other, they realized that the sacrifice they had made had come with a price. They had opened themselves up to the darkness, and the spirits that had followed them home had taken a hold of their souls. They were forever marked by their dabbling in black magic and their encounter with the spirits. They knew that they would never be able to escape the darkness that now lived within them. The three teenagers walked away from the cemetery, forever changed by the events that had transpired. They knew that they would never be able to escape the shadow of the sorcerer's curse, and that their lives would be forever haunted by the memory of that fateful night. As the three teenagers walked away from the cemetery, they thought they had defeated the evil spirits and that everything was over. Little did they know, they had fallen into the sorcerer's trap. The sorcerer's spirit had been watching them ever since they had stepped foot in the cemetery, and he had planned everything carefully. He had manipulated the teenagers into performing the blood sacrifice, knowing that it would open a portal for him to enter their world. As the days passed, the teenagers started to feel different. They began to experience violent mood swings and lost control of their actions. They would often find themselves doing things they didn't remember doing or saying things they didn't mean. It wasn't long before the sorcerer revealed himself, speaking through the bodies of the 3 teenagers. He had taken control of them and used them as vessels to carry out his dark deeds. Under the sorcerer's control, the teenagers committed unspeakable acts of violence and terror. They robbed stores, set fire to buildings, and attacked innocent people on the streets. The sorcerer reveled in their pain and suffering, using their bodies to spread chaos and destruction wherever they went. He enjoyed the power he had over them and took pleasure in watching them suffer. The teenagers were trapped, unable to break free from the sorcerer's control. They could see everything that was happening but couldn't stop themselves from doing the things they were being forced to do. Their families and friends were horrified by the sudden change in their behavior. They didn't know what had happened to the teenagers they once knew and loved. As the sorcerer's hold over them grew stronger, the teenagers became more and more dangerous. They were no longer in control of their own bodies and had become pawns in the sorcerer's game. It wasn't until a group of paranormal investigators stumbled upon the sorcerer's lair and uncovered his plans that the teenagers were finally able to break free from his control. But the damage had already been done, and they were forever scarred by the horrors they had been forced to commit. The teenagers never forgot what had happened to them and lived the rest of their lives haunted by the memories of the sorcerer's control. They warned others never to dabble in black magic, for they knew firsthand the terrible consequences that could follow.